Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have had this debate today, and actually grateful to the members opposite who, whilst they've been rather critical of what we on this side of the House have been to say, haven't resorted to the usual tactic of denouncing anyone who queries immigration as being some sort of a racist. We have had some sort of a sensible debate here, and it's very important. Yes, indeed. It's very important that we do this because the failure to discuss immigration over the last 10 years has been a direct factor in the increase in support for extremist parties like the British National Party. It is very important, therefore, that mainstream politicians on all sides are not afraid to hold this debate. And people have become concerned about immigration for a number of reasons. Firstly, as my honourable friend has just said, because of the sheer numbers involved, 10 million or so over the next few years alone. The member for Walthamstow talked about giving an amnesty to those who were already over here who had decided to overstay illegally. By sending out that sort of a message, however, is he not simply going to lead to an even greater increase of people coming here, many of whom will risk their lives paying people carriers and people smugglers to get them here in the first place? To give an amnesty like that would be to send out entirely the wrong message and to lead to even greater numbers coming. And anyone who knows anything about British history, and sadly fewer and fewer people do these days thanks to the curriculum, something we'll discuss another time, will know that whenever immigration has taken place on a very large scale in this country, it has always been quite disastrous. The best examples of immigration have on the whole been small scale, with manageable numbers of people coming from one country or one ethnic background, and most importantly of all, who have wanted to integrate. And I think the example of the Ugandan Asians, the Jews who came over here in the last century are very good examples of people who've come here wanting to integrate and to adopt the cultures of this country. The sad fact is that many people who are immigrating here at the moment simply do not want to integrate in any way whatsoever, and worse still, are actually demanding that laws in this country be changed to accommodate their own cultural beliefs. And I think we have a right to say that that is unacceptable. It is unacceptable, for example, that we have now legitimised polygamous marriages in this country. It is unacceptable that we hand a schoolgirl hundreds of thousands of pounds in order to fight a case to allow her to wear the hijab in contravention of school policies. It is unacceptable that government organisations will send out cards celebrating Eid, Diwali and all sorts of other religious festivals, which I'm quite happy with, but will not send out Christmas cards in case it gives offence to people. There are so many examples in which our laws and our cultures and traditions are being overturned in order to accommodate others who have simply got no intention of trying to integrate themselves. Members earlier on have talked about the impact on the economy, and it's been stated on various occasions that the effect of immigration has been universally good on the economy. I actually think that that is an impossible statement to make unless you're prepared to look at the costs to the economy of immigration as well as the benefits. It's undoubtedly true that there are benefits. As the member for Taunton has pointed out earlier on, it's much cheaper to get a plumber or an electrician in some areas as a result of immigration. He says, how much extra would it cost if we hadn't allowed immigration from the European Union to get your pipes fixed? The answer is that depends on how much extra that British plumber would have charged and how much higher his wages would have been. But there is no doubt that the wages of many skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled people living in this country would be substantially higher now than they would have been had not large-scale immigration taken place. And there's no need to take my word for that. The CBA joyfully made that analysis himself in a report that I saw in front of a select committee recently. There's, of course, been other effects on the economy. There has been the impact of large-scale immigration on education, as we've heard earlier on, also on the National Health Service. Whilst many people who have come here are working in the NHS, there are many more who have come here who are taking from the NHS, who are costing very large sums of money and who are simply not entitled to National Health Service treatment. The government have chosen to ignore this, are doing nothing about it, and in all of the targets that they have and all of the paperwork and forms that they expect NHS trusts to fill in about its patients, the one thing that they constantly choose to ignore is the number of people who are incorrectly accessing NHS services at very great costs.
Just taking a brief pause from his rant, would he care to reflect for one moment what kind of National Health Service, what kind of education system, what kind of transport system, what kind of science base we'd have in this country and this economy if there hadn't been significant levels of highly skilled and highly motivated migration over the past 30 years?
Many of the people who've come here to work primarily I'd say in the NHS and not so much in education, have been highly motivated and skilled and educated, and it's been a problem to the countries that they've left in many instances, because they've taken their skills away from countries that desperately needed them. That's why I think that if you want to be specific, if we look at Filipino nurses who work in my constituency, that has been a very positive thing, because there are more nurses in the Philippines than there are jobs. But if you take the example of nurses who've come from some of the African countries, by allowing them to come here, we've caused enormous problems to the countries in Africa where they were desperately needed. So it's a case of swings and roundabouts, and it's actually very difficult to generalise and talk about immigrants in the widest possible sense. You have to look at the countries from which they came and the problems that may or may not have been caused by accepting them. Can I just return to the issue that was raised earlier on this week with the Security Industry Association licensing people to licensing illegal immigrants to work in the security industry? I find it very difficult to believe that it wasn't until April of 2007 that the government found out about this, given that I'd tabled questions about it in September, following a meeting I'd had the previous June with a local representative of one of the security trade associations in Abergavenny, who was trying to tell everyone and anyone who would listen to him that this was going on. I find it quite difficult to believe that a backbench member of Parliament could have known almost a year before the Home Secretary that this was taking place, and that following questions tabled in September, the Home Secretary at that time was still unable to work it out for himself. But I believe that there are a number of other scandals in the Home Office, which I've also tried to draw ministers' attention to, which are yet to come out, and I'm going to put them on the record now before I close my remarks. Firstly, there are very large numbers of people in this country who are taking driving licences in languages other than English and are getting a full British driver's licence as a result. There are something like 100,000 people who took their licence in a foreign language, their theory test last year. 15,000 actually took the test with an interpreter, the practical test with an interpreter sitting in the back of the car, translating the instructions of the driving examiner to them. It is surely unacceptable that people are able to come to this country without speaking a word of English and to go off with it to gain a British driving licence as a result, and that is going to lead to accidents on our roads. And no number of local authorities translating signs into Polish is going to solve that particular problem. There is an enormous problem, as I indicated earlier, in the National Health Service, with people accessing care who've got absolutely no right to it. It is costing a vast amount of money to British taxpayers and making it harder for people who've paid their taxes and who live in this country to access the health care to which they're entitled. And I suggest that the government does something about this as well. And finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is quite rightly in place a licensing regime similar to the one that the Security Industry Association deployed for security guards for those who want to become teachers. Now, I've been told that a number of people who are applying to become teachers are doing so from countries where it is almost impossible to check their academic or their criminal records, but are still being granted that licence to go out and look for work as teachers as a result. I've drawn that to the attention of ministers in the Welsh Assembly previously. I believe that ministers in government may know about this, and I suggest that they investigate it before it becomes another subject of a tabloid headline. I do agree with the comments. I agree with the comments of virtually everyone in this House who've described the minister as a good man in a bad government. But I'm afraid he's going to have to do a lot more if he is going to tackle the problems that have been caused by his predecessors. There is too much immigration going on in this country. There are too many people coming here, and there are not enough people who are prepared to learn English, to adapt to our culture and our tradition. And that is causing people a lot of very genuine concern.
Kevin Jones.